Hello, my name is Mark Webb, and I'm in the spring semester of 2019 in CIS 6263 Cyber Physical Security. This is my paper. I chose the paper Targeted Online Password Guessing, an Underestimated Threat. So let's just kind of get into it. So first off, I'm going to kind of give an overview of what this paper is about. Kind of give a little bit of history of password guessing and the different types of hacking that's kind of going on out there. We'll talk about password hacking, and then we're going to talk about the algorithms that were developed within this paper. There's actually 4 of them. There's one that's called TarGuess 1, TarGuess 2, TarGuess 3, and TarGuess 4. So I'm going to try to go as high-level detail because I really don't have the the data scientist background and data analyst background to go into all of the different algorithms in that deep detail that the scientists could basically do it. And then we're going to talk about prevention, and then basically kind of wrap it up and kind of give a conclusion of what we can do with what we've learned in this paper and prevention and that type of thing, and kind of wrap it up. So first off, let's talk about the guys who developed this paper, and I'm going to call them the data brains. Okay, these guys are pretty sharp. We have Ding Wang, and the first 3 guys are going to be from Peking University out of Beijing, China. And this is kind of the lead guy right here. He's the one that gave there's a YouTube video out there where he basically gave a presentation on this paper. And then we have Zhang. I know I'm going to butcher the names. And we have Ping Wang. We have Jeff Yan, and Jeff is out of Lancaster University in United Kingdom, and he used to be with that university. He's basically, I think he's with another university now, and he's kind of does some things on his own. And then finally we have Xing Wang, who's out of Fujian Normal University in Fuzhou, China. The thing that kind of impresses me the most is how young these guys were, and how they, being so young, able to develop this very deep algorithm that they develop. So basically what it comes down to is, so kind of a big overview of what's going on here, is people have a tendency to reuse passwords among various accounts, which basically it makes you more vulnerable, because once they find out your password at one site, then they can basically guess what it is going to be in another site as well. Another problem is wow, if you're like me, I've got 8 different email accounts. I've got my banking account. I've got my works account. I've got my all kinds of different accounts out there. I've probably got, I don't know, 30, 40, some maybe up around 50 different passwords that I have to basically remember. And so if I can't remember 50 different passwords, so again, what do? We have a tendency to reuse the same passwords among the different sites. So again, how do you remember all of these? How do you remember all of these different things kind of going on there? And when the internet website was first introduced, I remember there's the movie Terminator, where I think it was the second one, where they came back and John Connor was basically a foster child, and he was kind of a computer hacker, and he basically was hacking an ATM where he just sticks this cyber card, that basically was like a ATM card, and he just ran a program that tried all the different pins till he finally hit one that worked. Well, that was great back then when the internet and ATMs first came out. There was an unlimited number of guesses. Well, of course, anybody could finally get the number. But today, we basically limit those, all the different websites, limit the number of tries, PIN numbers, that type of thing, again, to alleviate hackers from just unlimited guesses, because they'll eventually guess it. You know, I think, what is it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you give 1,000 monkeys a typewriter, they can basically develop a novel. So the most prevalent guessing today is what they call trolling offline. I'll define trolling here in a few slides, but it's getting data outside or around the user. In this case, they have password hacked files or data about the user that they then research offline and then basically make their guess. So first I want to talk about, I found a website called Alpha, and they had the top 10 hacking techniques out there today. And the first one is what's called dictionary attacks. And this is where we have a file of just simple dictionary words that we basically can try and see if those work. Not very successful, but you know, again, 1 out of 1,000 chance. Well, you might just make that 1 out of 1,000 chance. Brute force attacks, we use non-dictionary words. We just guess, and see what we get. Again, not very successful. Next one is called rainbow table attack, and this is where we have a list of pre-computed hashes. And these are numeric values that are used in encrypted passwords. This table contains hashes of all possible password combinations for any given hashing algorithm. Okay. Again, increases your chances of guessing a password slightly more. Phishing, now this is very successful. If I send you an email that looks like a regular site and I tell you, hey, your account basically needs to be updated, please type in your current logon and password and then change it. Well, it's a fake site, but it looks real. And when you type in your logon and password, you've now given whoever your logon and password. So, again, very successful today. We have social engineering, and this is where, this is also very successful, is where I call you up or contact you somehow saying, hey, I'm with the company, I'm with the IT department at your company, we're having some issues, blah, 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 and then I get you to give me your logon and password because you're thinking you're giving it to the IT guy when you're actually giving it to a hacker. Again, a company will never, ever ask you for your logon and password. Malware. Malware is also another successful one where it gets into your computer and you'll type in your logon and password, and that malware then captures that information and gives it back to whoever wrote the malware itself. I safeguard that by making sure that my account on my own computer is not an administrator account. It's a standard account. And anytime, and I've got everybody in my family the same way. I tell them if a screen comes up asking you to type in the admin password and you don't know why that screen came up, you click cancel. Now, is it 100% perfect? No, it's not 100%, but it gets close to that. So, but again, malware, I hate malware, but it's out there and it's successful. It works, like telemarketers. Shoulder searching. Now, this is a successful one as well. I stand it over your shoulder and I watch you type the keys and memorize that. I actually had my son had an Xbox 360 and we had it password protected where he couldn't do certain things, and they needed something, so I went down there and you have to use a controller, these certain little combinations, and his friend actually saw the combination I did and was able to duplicate it, and So shoulder searching, again, successful. I make sure no one's looking around, make sure no one sees your fingers typing on the keyboard. That's why most ATMs and when you shop at a big grocery store, when you slide in your card, you'll notice that the keyboard's kind of shielded now to keep people from being able to see what keys you're pressing. Plain old guessing. It's just kind of like brute force attack, but plain old guessing is just trying different things and seeing if it works. You're not going to be very successful with that. Now, the last two are going to basically deal with what this paper is talking about, And the first one is what's called offline cracking, and that's where we get access to a password file, which is what this paper is about, and then offline you study those files, figure out what type of password combinations they use, and then you basically kind of learn their system, and then you basically try it. And the last one is called spidering. And this is where you study a corporation or person via emails and websites and pick up on key words and key phrases and maybe find their kids' names and that type of thing. And then you basically start kind of seeing what type of passwords may work. Okay, so that's password hacking. That's kind of the top 10 of different things that are tried today. So the data brains, what they did is they were actually able to get 10 data set files of hacked passwords. And so they were basically exploited, and they got their hands on them legally. And so once they got their hands on these exploited files, they were able to then dissect it and find out. They could see the username, they could see the passwords, and they could then kind of start seeing trends and that type of thing. 5 of the tables were in English, with one of them being Yahoo. If you remember a few years ago, Yahoo got hacked, and 5 tables were in Chinese. What happens most of the time is password files that get hacked go unnoticed. And that's very dangerous, because when something goes unnoticed, there's no immediate threats, which means there's no safeguards put in place. So when those safeguards are put in place, they still have that file. They're still able to go in and hack, and log in and do all kinds of different damages. So using similar passwords across online accounts makes us all vulnerable to these bad guys out there trying to hack your system. And I guess it happens a lot more than people realize. So what is needed to guess a password? So that's kind of what we're going to get into now, is what do these data brains, what did they develop in order for us to in order for them to start guessing passwords with a high success rate? So the first thing they did is they had to set up roles. So they set up they set up a legend, and this legend is how they are able to determine different pieces and parts. So when they start developing their algorithm, they can put the pieces and parts in the right place. And so again, the very first role they came up with was they put a letter A for the attacker, otherwise known as the guesser. The next one is U, which is the user. So that's the person who the hacker's trying to basically get into their account. And the last one is the S, which is called the authentication server. So this is the server that has the passwords. What type of data encryption do they have? How are they stored? That type of thing. So that's basically very, very, very important. And keeping us safe on the internet is basically protecting our passwords with an authentication server. So these 3 make up the entities that the data brains used to basically come up with their algorithms. So basically the user has a registered account on a authentication server, and then A knows some personal information about the user. And one of the examples they used, one of the phrases they said, it could be a curious friend, an enemy, a jealous wife, a blackmailer, a hacker, an ex-wife, you know, a person you work with. You know, there could be any number of things that they know a little bit about you. Like, say, an ex-wife, they probably know a lot about you. They probably know your Social Security number. They know all of your kids' names. They know birthdays. They know, they may even know your driver's license number. So, so again, the attacker has to know a little bit more than just a few things about you. So, Ping Wang basically said, we have demonstrated that a large number of passwords can be guessed if personal information is known to the attacker. So, how much personal information? Now, what they basically labeled PII, or personally identifiable information. So when I talk about PII throughout this paper, it's talking about that personally identifiable information. Okay, and we're going to get into defining that a little bit more. So, what is PII? It's when people create passwords, then try to think of something simple so they can remember in the future. Again, I have over 50 accounts. How to remember all the passwords? Well, if I use this PII and that PII, then it's easy for me to remember. Again, it helps remember their PII as part of their passwords. PII is divided into 3 types. So they labeled 3 different types of PII. And the first is what's called user PII. Okay, that's the personal information about the user themselves. The next one is user ID credentials, their usernames, okay, which are things made public. Don't use part of your username as your password. That's bad. And the third one is, they said, is not identifiable to the work they're doing. So there's another type of PII that just really doesn't fall into what they need, so they're not going to basically discuss it in this paper. So PII has 2 types. There are 2 main types of PII. And type 1 consists of personal information, which is your name, date of birth, phone number, national ID, social security, email address, username, that type of thing. And then there's type 2, which is more about that person, like their names of their children, names of siblings, parents, any hobbies they may have, their anniversaries, where'd they go to school, what type of educational degree do they have, that type of thing. So that's a little more about them. And so the very first thing the attacker needs is to basically develop a guessing model. So they find out all this personal information, and then they have to develop a model. So some sites make a user change their passwords periodically. Where I work, we're forced to change our password every 90 days. Every 30 would probably even be better. But again, make sure you do change your password on a regular basis. User passwords vary among each other, just like people vary among each other. So just because I might use this type of password modeling for my passwords, my wife will use her own and somebody will use their own. So passwords models aren't going to be the same for every person. Some of their PII and others, some users use PII and some others use personal information. Okay, so they're not always going to be the same. Again, just like the previous bullet point, every user's password is going to be just a little bit different. Some prefer letters, some prefer numbers, some prefer different types of characters, hashtags, percent signs, that type of thing. By the way, some sites don't allow special characters, so that makes it a little tougher to come up with a sound password. Some users prefix to mix up letters and numbers. They use a little bit of both. And passwords are very diverse. I mean, they basically are different across the entire realm of logons and passwords everywhere. So, and they're always comprised of all kinds of different types of things: letters, numbers, underscores, ampersands, pound signs. Okay, so. And some will use numeric month, and others will actually spell out the month. Okay, so how do they come up with this algorithm? I don't know, but wow. So let's talk about passwords. So the first thing I talk about is this thing called LEET, L-E-E-T, and that's when we use numbers that look like letters. For the letter S, we use the number 5. For the number 1, we use the lowercase l. For an O, we use a 0. Some people will change up passwords on different sites by just changing from letters to numbers using LEET or using uppercase and lowercase. So the password's the same, they just change the case or use LEET instead. User may have password on one side, but a capital P password on the other side, or password W just capitalized on the other, or P and W and they use a 0, and so all different types of different combinations they can use, but the actual phrase is still the same. It's just how they kind of utilize it amongst the different sites. They might add a character, go from password to password 1. Okay. When we do this, when we change, we keep the phrase the same, and we add a number or we make one uppercase and lowercase. These are now what are called sister passwords, and that means that they're the same phrase, but just changing the case or adding one digit or using leet or using one uppercase, one lowercase. That's basically, again, they're all the same phrase, sister passwords. So these password rules are created by the users and are easily found or followed by the attacker. So that's kind of a good thing, but it's still bad. One example they have is, here we got Alice. And she uses Alice 1978 Yahoo for her Yahoo account. She uses Alice 1978 eBay for her eBay account. So guess what? What do you think her Gmail account's going to be? So the hacker has the other passwords. They can pretty much guess what that next password is going to be. So Dr. Zhang studied password reuse by dissecting these password files. So he went in and dissected these 10 files that he had access to. And he first tried to develop an algorithm that would guess future passwords by the user. Okay, and he called this a cross-site algorithm. And this algorithm didn't take into consideration passwords in false algorithm like I love you and password. We use $ signs instead of S's, which don't rely on PII data. So they found various popular passwords. Like 10% of the users can be guessed by the top 10 passwords. And I don't know if you know what those top 10 passwords are. Let me see my notes here. So the top 10 passwords are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The word password, welcome, ninja, ABC 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, sunshine, princess, and Curity. Okay, so those are the top 10 passwords. Why anybody would ever use those, I have no idea. But Chinese passwords are made up of simple digits. English passwords tend to have meaningful patterns to them. So again, English, I know nothing about Chinese. So Chinese are more simple digits, so those passwords tend to be a little more simple. And English passwords tend to have more of a pattern to them. And love, a matter of factly, has a huge role in people when they create passwords. I love you and princess were again in the top 10. And 5201314 and WOAINI1314 are the top 10 Chinese passwords. And what these mean, I love you forever and ever in Chinese. Passwords shared between sites is extremely high. Again, I've got 50 passwords. How do I remember them all? Well, of course, we want to try to reuse them between the different sites. And password reuse is very high. So it's using the same password over and over and over again. And passwords containing PII is very high. About 60% of passwords created use some type of PII data within them. So the data brains developed this thing called TAR-Guess. So this is their overall algorithm that they developed. And it's a framework that exemplifies online guessing with a pretty good success rate. So there are several situations in which TAR-Guess is based on data and information available to the hacker. Okay? So again, this is data that they have to know about beforehand. TAR-Guess developed the 4 algorithms that will be discussed. Along with developing these algorithms, they performed various experiments to prove the success of these algorithms. So not only did they come up with the algorithm, but they tried it, and it worked. And one of the issues with personal PCFG was the length-based passwords. These are new algorithms that rely more on type-based PII data passwords. Okay, we're going to define what PCFG here in a sec. So trolling. So I talked about trolling earlier. So trolling is an offline guessing. That's the bottom line what trolling is. I'm not online trying to guess the password. I'm actually got all of the data offline, and I'm going through the algorithm, and I'm coming up with it. So again, we're trying to crack as many email accounts or bank accounts or whatever account we're trying to get into, that we're trying to get in as many as we can. So of these 10 password files, they also found the following. Using trawling, they were able to recover a high percentage of passwords. Most of the data contained plain text passwords, meaning no special characters. 2 of the 10 contained large amounts of PII. For example, 18% consisted of names, and 54% consisted of date of birth. Oh, okay. So again, once we know your name, once we know your DOB, we got a pretty good chance of guessing your password now. So the DataBrains developed PII legend for the password. So we got all this PII data. Now they have to basically label each one of those pieces of data into a specific phrase or a legend. And so just a letter is a letter L, a digit is the letter D, an S stands for symbol. We've got name, letter N, and then B for birth date. Now I'll go into a little more detail on those two sub bullets there. And then A is the account name, E is email, P is phone number, and I is Chinese. So each legend item up above, so the L, D, S, N, A, E, P, and I, those can all be broken down a little bit further. And the example here is a B sub 1 is full date of birth, and B sub 2 is MDY format. Okay. So TARGUESS consists of 3 phases. So the first is we've got to gather the data, we've got to crunch the numbers, we got to basically kind of figure things out. And then 2 is we train and start dissecting and seeing what puzzle pieces fit in which puzzle. And then 3 is actually guessing and seeing if we can get in and get into your account. Okay, so kind of scary. But now, one thing I want to know, and I kind of said this earlier, is again, I am not a data scientist. I am not a data analyst. I kind of cover data analytical things in what I teach in the universities and colleges I teach at. But again, I'm not a full-blown data analyst, so I cannot do these algorithms the detail that they need to go into, because wow, they are really super complex. And so I'm going to kind of give a general high-level overview of them. So there are 4 scenarios that break down TARGUESS. TARGUESS 1, TARGUESS 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So TARGUESS 1. So this aims to guess passwords by exploiting the user's PII data. Okay. So once we've got those password files, again, we have to have either password files or personal identifier information. And we utilize the PII legend and break down each item in the legend even more. So we got the PCFG fields, which is name. So again, here we can break it down. We've got N_1, which is full name. N sub 2 is for the abbreviated name, and N_3 or N sub 3 is family name. So they can use those particular letters in their algorithm and kind of break things out. Again, the algorithm is really super complex. They can plug this so they could see, oh, they're using N sub 1 here and N sub 1 here, so we can probably pretty much guess they're going to use N sub 1 over here. It does the same with the other type 1 PII fields as well. The B, the E, the N, the digits, letters, that type of thing. So the basis is this. We're going to guess the user's password at one site when a sister password is leaked from another site. So if we can see the trend that they're using sister passwords, we have a pretty good chance of guessing their password at another site. So there are challenges like the number of times a guess before the account is locked. So that's a challenge, because again, you're only allowed so many guesses, and then that account is locked out. Are there over a dozen transformation rules like upper and lower case and leet? But they found that this TarGuess1 algorithm has a 84% success rate. So again, if we go through the 3 steps of gathering the data, and then basically training, and then actual guessing, 84% success rate. So TarGuess2. So this is when we have 2 password file lists. So what do you think is going to happen when we have 2 password file lists? Now I can see what password you're using over here and what passwords you're using over here, and I can now say, oh, hey, that they're basically, I can see a trend in the passwords now, and I can see what basically I can get more a higher success rate, because now I know what password trending they use. So they look for non-identical sister pairs and then measure how the passwords are modified. So they can see how the account's used here, how the account's used here, and then see what the differences are. The training phase of the TarGuess2 is to find pairs and parse passwords in the LDS, so the letter, digit, and symbol tags. And the same thing is done in TarGuess1. But in TarGuess2, there are 2 lists to compare to. With TarGuess1, we just have 1 list. The algorithm, with various experiments, outperforms the other algorithms, and their success rate is 900 to 300% higher than the other algorithms. They average 111% success rate. So TarGuess3, so this is when the attacker has 1 list, but they also have known PII data. So I've got 1 password hacked file, and now I do some research and find more PII data on you. So now I'm going to take that password file and your PII data, and now I can basically, through training, I can kind of figure out passwords now. The more PII data the hacker knows, the higher their accuracy. The training phase of TarGuess3 is to research the U. So again, that's the training phase. I'm gonna look you up. I'm gonna find all this information out there. There's actually a file out there that hackers can get to. It's got social security numbers. It's got it's got all kinds of deep PII data. The success rate of TarGuess3 increases by 73%. With Chinese passwords and 32% with English passwords. So a little higher with the Chinese passwords than with English. So TarGuess4 aims to guess the user's passwords by exploiting a sister password, as well as both type 1 and type 2 PII data. Okay, which is personal information and information like about kids and family and that type of thing, and usernames. So the problem with type 2 PII data is that it cannot be directly measured by using the same PCFG PII tag-based measurements as described earlier. Okay, so you can't use the same measurements. So we have to basically, the training is going to be a little more intense in TarGuess4. So to get around this, they're able to fill in the gaps by using outside theories like the Bayesian theory, which basically, instead of a frequency of propensity to some phenomenon, probability is interpreted as a reasonable expectation represents a state of knowledge or as a quantified of personal belief. So basically what that says is the more we know about that person, the more we can basically, our algorithm can get a little tighter. So TarGuess4 reaches a success rate of 77% against normal users with 100 guesses. Okay. So these guys developed these algorithms, but these algorithms basically you have to have hacked files. You have to have hacked password files in order to basically utilize these algorithms. So how do we stay safe? Well, number one, Don't use PII when you're developing your password. Stay away from personal identifiable information because, again, I can go out and look you up on Facebook, I can look you up on Twitter, I can look you up on the internet, I can look you up all these different ways and figure out how to basically see what type of PII data you're using on your password. So stay away from that. Use one password for that account. Don't reuse it anywhere else. So use it just for that account. Avoid sister passwords. Again, don't use leet. So if you're going to have a password on this site, don't use the same password on the site, but then swap the letters and numbers. Do not share amongst the accounts. So don't basically share your password amongst accounts. Again, use one separate password for each account. Change your passwords often. Change them often. Most browsers today will keep track of your passwords as well. One way to keep track of passwords, we can use a program like LastPass. The only problem is if they get your password, if they hack your password for that, they now have all your passwords. Okay, so that's dangerous as well. Great thing about programs like LastPass is they won't let you use the same password as you use for your password for that program. Browsers, same way. If someone hacks into your Google account, they now log into your Chrome, and now when they go to a site, boom, your password comes up. You can turn those features off. Probably a good suggestion to do that. So, kind of wrapping this whole thing up, in order to use these algorithms, the attacker must have access to hacked password files. They must be able to basically have access to them or hack them themselves. Most password files today have triple DES encryption, so if they are exploited, most likely the attacker cannot read the file. Do not, again, can't stress enough, don't use PII as part of your password. Always a good practice not to use the same password on multiple sites. Okay, we can't stress that enough either. And don't use sister passwords. Stay away from those. So my question is this. I got 50 accounts. How do I keep track of all 50 accounts? My small brain just can't do that. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but the attacker's counting on that. So bottom line, stay safe on the internet. So that's basically my my high-level overview of this paper, Targeted Online Password Guessing and Underestimated Threat. Thank you.